you see P01 and then let it go. Now this menu is definitely very important as a technician. So P01 is how you would clear any sort of fault code. So when you're at P01, you press start, and many of you may be familiar with the whole flashing display that maytags have done for a while now. That would be basically clearing the code. It'll go back to P01, and you could try to see what's going on. Now P02 here, which MITS will take us to, is going to be a credit cycle. So this would essentially be if someone's load wasn't washed and they wanted a credit cycle, you would come here, hit start, put the lid back on, and it will give you like a free vended cycle pretty much. It's like basically putting the money in. P03, it's a very important one. This is the diagnostic test mode. Now I can't run it here because we don't have any water hooked up to it or anything like that, but this pretty much as soon as you hit start will start your test cycle where it's going to fill with cold water for about 60 seconds, hot water for 10 seconds, and then it's going to agitate, drain out, and then go into a spin. So this could be a very good test to run in the field. And again, it will show some kind of weird stuff on the display. It usually gets people a little confused, but the test sheet does explain, if it says delicates, what exactly it means. So you can use that to kind of correlate exactly what's happening with what the machine believes should be happening. It's a good way to do a quick little test, about 2 or 3 minutes on the machine. P04 is a great feature on the top load specifically because this is actually our manual output menu. So when you hit start, it'll take you into another menu called the L menu, where you can pretty much cycle through all your outputs and kind of turn them on or off. So for here, we'll hit start. You can see that it says L00. Now L00 corresponds to this lid lock. So if you hit start, the lid is going to lock. Now, what can kind of confuse some people, we'll just kind of go through this briefly, but what can kind of confuse some people is if you needed to do, say, a spin, for whatever reason you're having, spin out complaints, and you want to verify that we can actually get up to a high-speed spin, you would lock your lid, and then you'd hit MITS, and you'd notice that it wouldn't really do anything. Well, that's actually because you have to hit delicates to get rid of the word locked, but your lid will remain locked. And then you can use MITS to go through your different cycles. So just kind of as like a brief overview for some of the main ones, 1 and 2 are cold and hot water respectively. 3 should be a drain. And then 4, 5, and 6 are going to be different types of motor movement, and 7 as well. It's between agitation and spin. If you ever forget any of those cycles or any of those options, they're all in the test sheet again. So that way you don't have to kind of guess. You can just go right through it and test exactly what you need to do. You can hold delicates to get out of the smoke, or press delicates rather, to get out of the smoke. Okay, now P05, you actually don't really need on this machine. This is the calibration cycle. A lot of people do it on the MAT 20, but honestly, there's no exact function to it because this machine does not have the sensing load feature. So this isn't really something to worry about with P05. You don't have to do it in the field. P06 is the last one that we'll talk about that's definitely useful in the field. This is the drain and spin cycle. So if someone's closed in spin out, you could take it here, hit start, and start your drain and spin cycle. And then we can exit that hub or that P menu. Any questions about that? I think we're good. Onto the dryer. All right. Give us 1 moment here while we just get the camera in place. All right, so here we have the MDG28. This is the kind of matching front load dryer to the MHN33. So you're going to see the programming on this machine is very, very similar to the MAT 20. We'll kind of go through it. It's very similar, but it does differ, so it's definitely important to understand those differences. Now, in this case, this is, again, a PD model, so we do have that service lid up top. But in the case that you didn't have the service lid or you didn't have the key and you needed to get to it, all these machines do have that AA1 connector, and in this case, you can also pull it off on this machine. So what you would do, which for simplicity's sake I'm not going to do here, is the sit setting. Now, this means exactly the same thing as it did on the top load washer. This is pretty much our price in pulses. Same concept applies. You can kind of increase it, and that'll set your price. Now, the only difference here to the washer is, for one, we only have 1 cycle price, so you can't change it for the 3 different heating options you have. It's just across the board. And you can't decrease on this keypad, so you just have to kind of go up and around through the cycle. So if I wanted sit 08, I would just keep going up until the number circled back around to sit 00 and then kind of start fresh. Next is the 7 setting. Now this is the dry time, and it's probably the most important, or one of the most important cycle settings or program settings to kind of consider here because of how it works and what it does. Its main function is to obviously set the time of the dryer. So this cycle or this setting is essentially multiplied by the sit setting. So what that basically means is, going back to our sit setting where I set it to sit 10, that means 10 quarters. Now, if the customer wants the machine to run for 50 minutes, I would take those 10 quarters, I would set it to 705 for 5 minutes per quarter. This also affects the top off as well. So if they wanted to add an additional quarter to get an additional 5 minutes. But that's basically how that cycle timing would work. So that's important when setting price, because you kind of have to do a little bit of math and also see what prices are possible for what times and vice versa. So if your price is 10 quarters, but you want 42 minutes, it's not exactly possible. You might want to round that up to 45 or something like that, kind of go in between. You have to kind of work within what margins are set. So it's definitely something very good to know. Just remember that the sits is the price, and then that price in quarters gets multiplied by this number to create how long we go for. Now this 8 setting here, this is basically our fit cycle. So similar to how the washer had some rinse options, this dictates whether the machine is set to fit cycle, or if it's not, if you can do top off. So pretty much just means, can I add additional quarters for time per minute or per quarter, or do I have to put the full then value in to get more time? This 9 setting is the same thing. It's the cycle counter option, just like it was on the washer. You can hit the delegates button 3 times in a pretty good pattern to get 9OC, which will basically turn on cycle counter, which, as we mentioned before, will count how many cycles the machine has done. 1 is the same thing. It's our money counter. So again, delegates 3 times. We'll turn that on, and it will tell us how much money has essentially been put in the machine whenever we open the service lid. 2, very similar to the washers, going to be the same thing as the special pricing. So delegates for special pricing. And then the help menu, which once again we will circle back around to essentially, look at the help codes and things like that, so you can get some eyes on that. Okay, so now here we have the 3 setting. This has to do with the special pricing, so we're actually going to just move on from that for now, and if we have time at the end, we'll circle back around. But you'll see there's some extra options in here for special pricing, and it's all in the tech sheet to go through. But it's pretty niche cases. You don't usually see a lot of special pricing in the field, but on the off chance you do, it'll be good to know. Okay, now the A setting is once again the vault viewing option, just like it was on the washer. Same thing, you pull out the money box, it'll show you what kind of, how much money is supposed to be in there, or estimated to be in there. B setting, once again, same exact thing as before. It's going to set our price, or our value rather, per pulse in nickels. So in this case, 5 nickels, 25 cents. So it sets us up for quarters, basically. C setting, same exact thing. It's going to be just the coin 2 input. Now the D setting, this is another one just like the other one. Coin slide. So if you're using a dryer with a coin slide, which honestly you usually see more dryers use coin slide than washers, so it's probably a little more useful in this case to know that the DCS is coin slide. Now we have the E setting. Once again, delegates 3 times. EAC, that's the add coins option. As a reminder, that pretty much takes your sit setting, so sit 10 in this case, and instead of saying 10 quarters is equal to $2.50, it'll say 10. So it's good for token environments. Now the J setting, once again, this dictates whether we're card, coin, or OPL. So in this case, _D can be debit or it can be OPL. 3 times quickly again will get us to CD. Again, this doesn't mean coin drop, it means card and debit, or coin and debit, sorry. 3 times again will get us to JC, which is basically just coin only. Now we're at the L setting, which is basically LPS, so delegates for price suppression. Same thing as before, it just kind of hides the price. NCE, once again, clear escrow, delegates will switch it. Permanent press, which is the U setting. This is, again, the penny increment offset, good for debit environments to kind of offset that nickel value of the B setting. And then we are back to the beginning of the programming. So let's put the lid on. Now, one thing, since we had a question before about the P menu and kind of how to do diagnostics, I won't run it on this again because we don't have the machine hooked up fully, but if you did want to run a free diagnostic cycle, you would go to your sit setting, you would hold delicates until your display flashes, make sure your door is closed, and press the permanent press button. That would start up like an 8-minute test cycle. So for those of you who are troubleshooting in the field, good information to know on how to run it when you get there. Any questions about that? Camera's all set. Okay, perfect. So this here is the MLG22, or typically MLE22 if it's electric. It's basically a stack washer dryer. Now, one thing I didn't mention on the dryer was the catch sheet like I did in the front load. When you take off that console, if you lift the top panel, you'll see that the touch sheet's mounted up top there. For this washer and dryer combo, it is going to be at the base of the machine. So every machine should have a touch sheet. It's definitely one thing that's good to have. And if you go to Service Connections, you can always download it if you don't have it. So now this machine, we have our main screen, we have a key, and we have all the screws on the front. So to get into service, the easiest way is with the key. That's even for PD, that's for PR, doesn't matter, coin, debit, they all have the key. Now in this case, if you do forget the key though, not all hope isn't lost. If you do forget the key or you don't have it or it's broken or what have you, you can actually take, in this case, the sit setting, normal. For the bottom, we have multiple pricing options for each cycle, just like we had on the MAT20 and just like you would have on the MHN33. So one thing to note here is even though this is a stack washer dryer, this part of the keypad pretty much, if you get rid of the dryer, is the same thing as the MHN33. So this pretty much apply to it. So that's one good thing to definitely note here. So you have sit cycle or sit setting for the rest of your cycles. So power wash will increase just like the other one, and we do have the option to decrease with temperature. Now for the dryer, you have a sit setting as well. So price for the dryer, you can use the heavy duty to advance, and again we can't go down to just kind of go back and around to loop it. We have one for delicates, power wash, and then we go to our 7 setting. So now here we basically have what is our wash time. So we have an 11-minute wash time and then a 45-minute dry time. This would be if it was OPL, but it's the same thing as the front load dryer, where this 7 setting gets multiplied by the price for the dryer to basically create that time. So if you had 1 quarter and you had 5 here, it'd basically be 5 minutes. If you had 2 quarters, it'd be 10 minutes, and so on and so forth. Now the 8 cycle here, this is pretty much the 5th cycle option for the dryer, just like it was on the front load dryer. And then for the washer, we have our additional rinse option, just like on the top load. Instead it's not a rinse time, it's just additional rinse. So you can turn it on or off with the delicates button. And same thing for the dryer, delicates. 9, once again, delicates 3 times fast, same labeling, just slightly different location. 90C, it's our cycle counter. We have our money counter here. And we have special pricing, as well as the help menu, which we will go back to on this one because it is a bit different than the MAT20 with some of the options. A, again, which is the vault viewing. B, again, our pulses, or rather the value of our pulses. So BL5, again, is 25 cents because it is in nickels. C, this is normally C20 by default, so this value technically doesn't matter if you're using just 1 coin drop, but again, in debit environments or if you have 2 coin drops, this value can be key. E, once again, we have EAC for add coins. And then we do have the H settings, just like we had in the top load, where power wash will increase, temperature will decrease, and it's basically, again, as a reminder, adders for price for certain features. So cool, warm, hot, extra rinse, and then we're back to that J setting. And again, just like the other 2 machines, J_D is debit or OPL, JC is coin, and then JCD is coin and debit, so we can kind of look for both. L, once again, price suppression. NCE, it's our clear escrow option. And now here's where things get a little bit different from the MAT20. We have a RPM or a spin speed setting. So here you have your spin speed. So we can go up to 999, which is basically 1,000 RPMs, 600, 750, 800, and then back. So you can go through kind of any of those. So for certain applications, you might want different spin speeds. Again, we have the penny increment offset. Again, for debit applications, you do have one for each pocket. However, you have one for the dryer and one for the washer. Now again, we'll kind of go through these quick. A1, and then the rest of them. This is that thing I mentioned on the MAT 20 with that chart, where essentially you have different behavior for each cycle, and you can actually use that chart to kind of change what this value is, which will change how the cycle behaves. So it's for a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then it kind of comes back around. So it's very similar, as you can see, to the MAT 20, even down to the diagnostics. They differ in some key ways, but in general, they are the same. So just like the MAT 20, we go to our sit setting, we hold delicates, and we're at the P menu. Now P1, in this case again, we'll clear it out. This clears the faults for both the dryer and the washer, so that's something that's good to note, because some people might think that you'd have to clear them separately, but they do kind of clear together under that P1 option. Now P2, same exact thing as before, it's a credit cycle, so another good way to kind of start the machine if you don't have coins, but you do have the service fee, or if a customer's machine didn't work right and need to run it for free, much easier than trying to set your vend price to 0 and start it that way. P3, again, it's the quick overview test. This pretty much goes through, just like the MAT 20, a 2 or 3 minute test or so, to kind of go through the basics, filling, washing, draining, and spinning. So it's a good way to kind of verify total functionality. P4 is very much the same. It doesn't work quite as the same as the MAT 20, where you can, turn on or off certain outputs, but it's pretty much a version of the P3 test where it goes through all the main functions, but it's a bit longer, and you can actually manually skip steps. So you could say, you don't care too much about the fill, you want to see the spin, well, you could kind of skip to that portion of it. And again, all that info on like what the different symbols mean and all the things that are happening is in the test sheet, because it's kind of just like a flow chart. Okay, now in this case, P6 is going to basically be our drain and spin. This is important in this case, because if you need to do a drain and spin, then someone's clothes doesn't spin out, or you just maybe put a new belt on, and you want to make sure it goes up to speed, or what have you. This is a quick way to just make sure our drain pump gets on and we can get up to speed with spinning. So that's the main options for the P menu. Again, there are more options in here, but this is really what you should kind of care about. And if you did want to know those options, or you needed to, they are all in the test sheet, from different keypad tests to display tests, but these are the main ones that would kind of concern you. Now, one last thing I did want to show was the help menu and how it's a little bit different on here. So again, you go to your 2 setting, you press temperature, and you have your help menu. So here's your first help code, second help code, third help code, just like it was on the MAT 20. And now we have faults top and bottom. And we even have more faults here. So it goes up to 8 on the front load washer. Dryer still at 4. Okay, so now here is our suds routine, just like the MAT 20. You can set it on or off, recommended to be on. Now here's the suds routine time. You can set this. It's recommended to be at 5 minutes, but you can technically change it. This is the rebalance attempt. So if it goes out of balance, how many attempts does it give? 10 is the max. It's also at 10 by default, and 10 is typically recommended because it gives you the most opportunity to possibly correct the cycle rather than end it. And now we're back to software revisions, SC, SC. Now you notice how there's 2 numbers. A lot of things people don't realize is that at the very top of the dryer, there is another control board up there that controls the dryer. So this is the software for that board on top, and then the software for the board at the base of the washer, the CC board. EC is just kind of the memory software, and then SU is this display board. So you notice it's the same for top and bottom, it's because we have one display. EU, same thing. And now here's our current spin RPM. So if you were in a cycle and you say came to this menu, you could actually see our current RPMs. This here is the requested power draw of the motor. Kind of important, and it could help you diagnose if you have a motor issue, something like that. It's just good info, as much info as you can kind of get from the machine to tell you what's going on. And then here under the U, we have our current unbalance. So this is kind of like the metric the machine uses to kind of decide, like, okay, we're going out of balance. Because as many of you may know, if there's no limit switches on this machine, it's all kind of electronically calculated from the motor control. So this is kind of telling you, okay, this is our value. We're going out of balance. How severe is it, and so on. So, and that's pretty much it for the help mode. Correct. Yeah. So
Factory
you basically want to
reset.
do the factory reset. Okay. Just get everything out of the way. Good clear camera angle. Okay, so for the MAT20 factory reset, it's probably the simplest one. The other ones can get a little more complicated. But typically you would only want to do this in some cases. So this isn't just something to do. Don't, go into a customer site, start factory resetting their machines, right? They might be a little upset about that. But if they have a debit card reader and they need to get rid of it and it's stuck in enhanced debit mode, or if, maybe they have some sort of issue with programming, it could be, something you can try, right, when you're out in the field trying to diagnose some issues. So the first thing would be to enter service mode, like we talked about earlier with either the jumper or with the service lid. Now, once you're in service mode, you just need to find either the sit setting, or if this was that scenario I mentioned where they were getting rid of a reader, it would say DAS, as in data acquisition. Now, once you're at that menu, DAS or this, you're going to hold your delegates, and then you bring your P menu. Press MITS until you get to P13. Press start. You'll see these 4 H's. Now, what you want to do is press power wash 3 times, and you'll start seeing some numbers. And now hit power wash and delegates at the same time, and then power cycle the machine, and that'll basically factory reset it. Now, again, it's not something to just kind of go out and do, but in the off chance you need to, fix a Gen 2 reader, or you need to, switch readers, or, what have you. You kind of know the scenarios. That would be how you would factory reset it. It's bad. Any other questions?
Could we do that with the dryer and the stack machine as well, as far as how to get rid of DAS or to reset it?
Yeah, we can try to go over it with the dryer. The dryer is a little more complicated. It's a very time-sensitive sequence, so I can kind of read it off to you, but we don't have it set up to pull the cord. Typically, for the dryer, you're gonna want probably 2 people. You need someone to either hit a breaker or pull a cord. The washer, not so much. We can go over that one quickly as well. But the dryer, you usually need 2 people. So let me just I'll kind of read off the instruction. So just give me 1 second. We'll start with the washer first, since that is the simpler one that is technically like a one-man operation. Just give me 1 moment. Get the camera in place. All right, perfect. Everyone can see that. So now, let me just open the door. So if you ever see 0 minutes, something I should have mentioned, if you ever see 0 minutes, it doesn't mean the machine's frozen or has no time. Just open the door. That'll clear it. Something that confuses people sometimes. So first step would be, just like the MAT20, turn your key, go to your sit cycle setting here, P1, and now in this case, you're not going to P13, you're actually going to P9. So you're going to basically press the start button, and then from here, you're going to press temperature 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. It's going to do the same thing. You're going to do temperature and start together. And then again, power cycle. So this one's, again, very simple. Okay. Now I am going to pull up the key sequence for the dryer, because like I said, the dryer is a bit different. We don't have the advantage of that P menu or anything like that. So it's a little more complicated and does require that second hand. I won't say requires, but it's definitely going to be a lot easier with a second set of hands, unless you're really quick. So, second. So on the front load dryer, you are going to, second, here we go. So the front load dryer, as I mentioned, is a little more complicated. So the first step is pretty much to have everything, off, door shut, and lid open. At that point, you basically power cycle the machine and wait for it to come up. Now, it'll come up in your programming. Ideally, you'll be at either the sit setting or data acquisition. Now, once you're at data acquisition, you have to flash the display. So if delegates, you hold that down, your whole display should start to blink like we did for diagnostics. Now, when it's blinking, what you're going to do is you're actually going to open the front door and then close the service lid. Or, by that same logic, you can put the AA1 jumper in as well. That still works in this case. Once that jumper's in, you basically have about 6 seconds or so to press left, middle, left, middle, left, right. So that's one button at a time. Left, middle, left, middle, left, right, and then power cycle the machine. Now, the catch here is you can't have your card reader connected, you can't You have to do it pretty quick. So it is a little more complicated, but it can be done. And the perfect scenario would be you show up, you get rid of the carburetor, get it completely out of the equation, make sure it's not even powered, just kind of get it out of the machine. Do that sequence and maybe have someone nearby who can either unplug it or flip a breaker or what have you, just to cut power to it to do that reboot. This is one that takes a couple tries, so I would say try it a few times first, and eventually you should see it reset, just because it is so time specific comparatively to the Mac 20 and the 22, because they just have a P menu. So. Any other questions?